watching Restream.
I will. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for hopping up and pushing.
Gonna make points here shortly.
Yeah, I love these conversations. Look, I love these conversations. I love the moral conversations. Oh.
Yeah, I'd love to continue this at another time. Like you definitely have great considerations. But fire up. I feel J Money right now.
Just saying.
These concepts. Like, have you read anything from Alan Gorth, Gretchen?
Not without a court order.
Yep, exactly.
I've looked into moral realism a bit, not that much. I haven't read any of that.
But you're a theist, right?
I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm a theist. Like,
really? Okay. I'm sorry. I painted you.
He's kind of a raised Catholic, but agnostic.
Okay, that's a blunder on my part completely.
Yeah, I have my own version of belief and my own. I critically think when it comes to everything. Like I don't like when I was saying the other day was like with the Bible and all. I tend to and then, but it's not. I don't.
So you don't believe that?
No, I think morals are stuff like it because we have these fun, But that's what
I believe my argument is reason giving.
No, I get you. Like
where the disconnect is, but like. I don't know if it's just like my inability due to my autism
to see it
or
from your framework. I'm
I'm
still trying to see it from nobody's.
No, I get. Yeah, like I assume you're a fucking genius and all that stuff. Like I'm terrible at maths. Like
I am so fucking normal that I think I might be abnormal at this point.
Not to brag, but I did just take an IQ test live on stream and got 135 while 3 drinks deep. So like I'm not a dumbass.
Interesting.
Yeah, like dude, like honestly, like for most of my
neurodivergency. Like I just have a little different like.
I get it. I completely get it.
It's how I'm able to like handle higher order maths.
Yeah, like I assume you're a fucking genius and all that stuff. Like I'm terrible at maths. Like
I am so fucking normal that I
guess
think
he's
I'm
a genius.
abnormal at this point.
Not to brag, but I did just take an IQ test live on stream and got 135 while 3 drinks deep. So like I'm not a dumbass.
Yeah, like dude, like
where like things start to get messy because like I believe there can be like an ultimate source, a foundation to reality, but I don't believe it's personal, and that's how I describe God as a personal ultimate foundation.
Oh yeah. That's
and
the funny
so
thing about all that. We personalize it though, because we don't understand that it's
anthropomorphization.
Classical literature of what all the fucking ancient Greeks and
Andy left.
Aristotle and all were all talking about was that
that's the reason why I was going to go up there.
Existence, it created forms of life that the same.
More like a Gnostic
experience life, if that makes sense. Because
like necessitate. I believe that's quite compatible with like a Gnostic.
Aware of the depth of everything, but it also created other entities that the wave function itself isn't aware of. Does that make sense? It's not aware of these.
I don't believe that's quite compatible with like a Gnostic framework. Because a Gnostic framework like requires some sort of like personal entity with that ultimate foundation.
Oh, I was just about to join the panel and go
classify all that.
Go see you, Andy. But you want to come on up?
It's just spiritual in nature. Do you know what I mean? Because it boils down to
you get the link.
The foundational breath of the universe just being. The universe itself is the entity. if that makes sense.
I'm trying to follow along, but I'm unfortunately failing. That might be like inebriated mindset failure on my part.
It's not. I think I'm explaining very, very poorly. Like
So apparently RP has got a 135 IQ in an inebriated state, but he couldn't understand the waveform that Kyrian was just explaining to him. Just wanted to point that out. Come on up, Andy. You're the reason why I was going to go up on panel anyways, because I wanted to see if we could do a John wrote John kind of debate. Hello. What is up, man?
Hello.
What's going on? How are you doing?
I'm alive and well. How are you?
Okay. Sounds like you get a little cold or something. Maybe are you all right?
No, I'm good.
Excellent. Yeah. So I was hoping that we could get into like John wrote John and see if I could convince you that that's the case.
Okay.
Unless you had something else you wanted to.
No, I don't care. I don't have any plans.
All right, cool.
I'm like back in my brain trying to think of why you might be convinced of that.
Yeah. Let me first of all get to verse 21, 24. And I should probably bring that up. There we go. Okay. So it says right there, verse 24, this is the disciple which testifieth of these things and wrote these things, and we know his testimony is true. So I guess that, like, writing of John Hancock wasn't necessarily a thing back then for like scrolls or parchment or whatever, but we have to assume, since the thing is named John, that whoever is, whoever's name is on the, title, I guess, is the person who wrote this verse 24. Would you disagree?
Why would you
with
think that? Why would you think that?
I mean, like I said, from what I understand, like people don't like write their signature on their parchment or whatever back then, but I could be wrong about all of that. So,
Well, I'm not in opposition to you. That tab or whatever. It's like putting my voice back here.
you're good.
Or just mute it.
You're
Or
right.
just mute it. Oh, yeah. I can hear going back when the tab is open.
Oh, really? Okay, I need to.
I don't remember how to fix it. That worked. Perfect. That's perfect.
All right, cool.
So I don't
Sorry about
disagree that the end of John says that that the beloved disciple is the one that gave them this information. I don't see where you get the idea that the beloved disciple is John.
Well, are you talking about verse 24, or are you talking about where it says the beloved disciple?
Well, yeah, verse 24. Well, I mean, it starts the book out by saying that they're getting the information from Jesus's beloved disciple. So when it says, this is the disciple who is testifying in verse 24, that's who they're talking about, the beloved disciple. And so I don't see any reason that we would conclude that John was the beloved disciple. If anything, it would be James.
So you think it's possible that James wrote John, or parts of it, or something like that?
Well, I think it's probably none of the apostles that wrote John. It was probably just a follower of the Christ movement. Later on. I mean, John was written 60 plus years after Jesus died. So it's probably somebody from the father. And also John was said to be illiterate, and it's like, and John is like a highly complex piece of literature. It's like it's really polished and like highly advanced Greek. And John was said to be illiterate in the gospel. So that makes me think it's probably not John that wrote it. I mean, he could have used a scribe, but you'd think the scribe would just, I don't know. If you're illiterate, it doesn't seem like you're going to be a really good speaker, but then also be illiterate. So it kind of seems sketchy to me, I guess. But I think that there's no reason to think that the beloved disciple was John, regardless. I don't know where that came from or how that tradition started, but the gospel was just originally anonymous and said that the information came from the beloved disciple. We don't know who that was. They never name him. It could have been Mary. It could have been Mary Magdalene for all we know. We literally have no idea.
Okay, but we know. Okay, well, we don't know if he was illiterate, but
it literally says he was. It literally uses the word illiterate when it refers to John. It says he was, it says the word unlearned, I believe, or something like that, or whatever. Like it says he couldn't write because he was unlearned or something.
Do you know where that would be found?
I don't. I'm
Maybe
sorry.
in Acts or something.
I think it's in John.
I know that there's I think in Acts 4 or something, there's something like that, but you're saying it's in the gospel itself?
I can't remember. It's been so long since I've read it. Can you hear me right now?
No problem. Yes, I can.
Okay. Or unlettered, actually, I think is the word.
Yeah, Acts 4.
Is it Acts? Yeah, it's Acts John, or it's Acts 4.
Yeah, it's Acts 4:13.
Oh, I actually have Acts open right on my lap right now.
So it
says now when they saw
13, and it specifically names Peter and John.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's interesting. Let me full chapter this here. Oh wait, let me see what that also was referencing Corinthians something. Okay, that's nothing.
So it seems like
seem to be related to the disciples. So,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It could. There's a chance that it could be that they were.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, I can. You said there's a chance that they could have been what? Because you broke up.
Well, there's a chance that they could have. It could be referring to them not being taught the rabbinic teachings rather than being taught how to read and write. I guess there's an argument for that. I don't know. That doesn't really matter, though. So, I mean, the fact that the Gospels are written half of a century plus after the events is a huge problem for me.
Yeah, was it you that I was showing the 2 Timothy, or what was it? Darn it, I need to pull up another window. I forget the verses too, but where it shows that Paul was asking for Mark and Luke to come visit him or whatever.
Yeah, he said that Mark would be helpful to his ministry.
Is that you I was having that argument with, or?
Probably.
Yeah. So, So, that doesn't really correlate with, like too much of time that had passed before they were all getting together and writing stuff, if that's what we're made to believe. And the fact that they didn't mention the Second Temple destruction in any of the writings. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you think that they were getting together?
Well, if Luke wrote Luke and Mark wrote Mark, and they are profitable for the ministry, like I've been arguing, like it's like they were probably writing Acts. They were probably writing. Well, I don't know what they wrote, but at least Acts, maybe Hebrews, right? So I mean, otherwise, I don't see what being profitable for the ministry is, because we know Paul actually fell asleep preaching the gospel to a bunch of people in a room one night or whatever. So like he wouldn't send out other people to like preach for him. I mean, I guess he was jailed, but they were probably writing stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand. There's a big gap for me between them being profitable for the ministry and meaning that means that they're writing things. Because when you think of a ministry, like anyone on this earth, if you were to ask them what a ministry is, it's people going around preaching. It's not people creating writings. You know what I mean? No one thinks of creating writings when they think of a ministry. When you think of Isaiah's ministry was him preaching. He wasn't writing documents. So when Paul says that Mark would be useful to his ministry, it seems silly to think that he's talking about creating writings. It seems much more likely that Mark is familiar with the Jesus tradition and has a good way of speaking or something. And
okay, but to me, it's like, if these are the accredited names that the Gospels are linked to, and we have this verse here in Timothy that they were probably collaborating and writing down stuff, because to me, ministry is like basically providing comfort in any way that is necessary, whether it be like going to a church for shelter or for food bank or for salvation or a sermon, something like that. Not necessarily just straight up preaching or apologetics or going around knocking on doors. So the ministry part could mean a lot of different things. And so if that being the case, then none of these writings actually contain any information about the Second Temple, which they would have boasted about Jesus being right on that prediction. Makes me think this all happened before 70 AD. John could be a separate thing. John is probably definitely a separate thing, because he wrote about the churches had been established, in Ephesus and Philadelphia and all those other. So like that obviously happened after Paul did all that stuff or whatever, which would have been later. And I don't think Second Temple is mentioned in that. So, that's a kind of a, angst against my argument, but just the way I see the timeline breaking down.
well, I mean, you could argue that even Mark, the most primitive gospel, mentions the destruction of the temple.
In 70 AD?
It doesn't give the date. They never give dates for anything in the Bible, but it does talk about, they walk out of the temple, and one of the followers of Christ says to Jesus, "Good teacher, what marvelous stones and what marvelous buildings." And Jesus says to them, and he's talking about the temple. The temple is a series of buildings that are all made of marvelous stones. Obviously, this is Herod's temple that they're living in, so it's got the big extension onto it, the western wall, that part of the temple. It's a bunch of buildings. So he's referring to the temple. And he says, "What marvelous stones and what marvelous buildings." And Jesus says that all of the stones will be torn down. So the author seems to, I mean, it's either the author knows that the temple is going to be destroyed, or we're saying that he was like a psychic, or the story's true, or whatever. So yeah, he does mention the destruction of the temple. And I believe Matthew carries that same verse as well.
Right. It's meant to be like a prophecy of something
Yeah, it's
that
meant
is a
to
future
prophecy.
event to be fulfilled, a psychic, whatever thing, prophecy, whatever. So, like in all the writings of Paul and everyone except John, well, maybe not everyone, but it stands to reason that that is a major event that, in Israeli history, they would have wrote about something about that event. Like, see, the Lord was right. And when he said that the temple was going to be blah, 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 they would have put something like that in there. And so the fact that we have these guys collaborating in Rome, I assume here, with Paul, that they wrote this stuff before the temple destruction.
Well, again, you're assuming that they wrote anything.
True.
We don't have a reason to think that. You have to consider that, like, our earliest, and I know we've talked about this already, but our earliest gospels were anonymous. Names were only ascribed to them, like, literally centuries later. People that were not even alive during that time were the ones attaching names to these gospels. We have no idea who wrote them. It was just followers of the movement. It could have been people that were against the movement. We have no idea. We have no clue who wrote these stories.
So
That's
you're saying,
just academic scholarly truth of the matter. Any scholar, any Christian or atheist scholar will tell you the same thing that I'm telling you.
so you're saying that, like, right here in Timothy, where it says Luke and Mark, that was attributed to, like, an insertion by the church or whatever
No,
when they compiled
that's not
this.
what it doesn't say that Luke and Mark wrote anything here in Timothy. It says that they were useful to Paul's ministry.
Yeah, but I mean, if they were getting together and they were talking, and they're, the ministry being the, the spreading of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that was kind of their goal. I mean, it stands to reason that they were writing stuff and not just, hanging out and, in jail and stuff or whatever. Right? What else are you going to do in jail but write stuff?
I don't know, talk to each other, talk to prisoners about Jesus's message. I have no idea. I don't know why. I don't know why you think that I think you are connecting writing stuff because we have gospels now. So you're like, they must have been writing those gospels when they were in prison, but there's no indication of any writing going on.
Okay, but wait, if you have certain parts of the gospels kind of, almost literally even literally word for word kind of copying each other. And these guys were both together in the same room with Paul. Like, it should be clear that they were definitely collaborating and writing stuff down.
Then why would they? So there's parts of, like, Matthew and Luke, for instance, where they change things that Mark said or leave things out that Mark said or add on things to what Mark said to change the meaning of, the original meaning. That wouldn't be the case if they were working together. Like, these gospels are in competition with one another.
But I mean, you see some of that, like variations of the testimony, but you also see, like, literal word for word, almost plagiarism or copying word for word of certain parts. So it's like it's almost like a 50-50 mix, if you compare one to the other or certain ones to certain others. And so the fact that they were collaborating here, or they were gathering there, it's safe to assume that they were writing stuff together, and that's why you have that literal word for word kind of copying of each other's works.
No, that's crazy. I mean, that's a crazy huge jump. That there's no evidence for that. We don't even know that they could write. We have no idea. Like, writing was, like, what, 15% of people? Like, there's an 85% chance that they didn't even know how to write. So, I mean, do you think they had scribes cruising around with them at all times, just ready to write stuff down? Or?
Well, I think Luke and Mark were scribes, if I'm understanding right.
Are they?
I think so. Like,
I know Luke was a physician.
Was he? Okay, yeah, I think you're right. I think Luke is with. So maybe Luke was there doing, like, prostate check on Paul, and Mark was the guy that was the scribe for Peter or something.
Yeah, I mean, that comes from a tradition 400 years after Jesus from Eusebius, he's claiming Polycarp said that, and Polycarp's claiming there's such a long chain of people that this information went through. Eusebius is claiming that Polycarp said this several decades after the events, and he heard it from people that weren't even witnesses.
What was the claim that he made?
He made the claim that Mark, this is a big problem, by the way. So Eusebius says that Polycarp made the claim that Mark got his information directly from Peter.
Okay, I
But
don't
the
know any
funny
of this, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, Eusebius just quotes. He doesn't like the whole work of Polycarp isn't preserved, but we have quotes of it from Eusebius, and in some of his quotes, he quotes a part saying that that Polycarp is saying that he got his information from one of the apostles or whatever, and then he said that Mark received all of his information from Peter. I have an issue with that though, because in Mark's gospel, there's a part in Mark's gospel in the Garden of Gethsemane, right when Jesus is seized by the Romans, and if you read in Matthew's version of this account, it says that Peter cut the guy's ear off. I think it was like the servant of the Pharisee or something like that. You remember that?
Yeah.
Well, in Mark's version, who according to Eusebius got his information from Peter, in Mark's version of that story, it just says one of them who was there cut the guy's ear off. It doesn't even name them. But Mark is allegedly getting the story from Peter. So he wouldn't just say one of them is there, he would have said Peter. And also, Mark's narrative is extremely lacking in details about Peter. It barely talks about him. You would think if he was getting the story from Peter, you would get Peter's perspective and a bunch of things that only Peter knew about. You get none of that.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think I told you, like, my perspective on Mark is, I think Mark is basically a on steroids version, summary of these other gospels, actually, because it's more likely that, excuse me, the more detailed gospels are not going to be they're not going to be just like fabricated out of thin air based off of Mark, as opposed to the more detailed gospels would be, Mark would be a summary of the more detailed gospels.
That's the exact opposite of how it works, though, because not only across the ancient Mediterranean do we see it as kind of a tradition, but really, really specifically in Jewish literature, do we see it as a tradition where authors are super unlikely to remove text. They always add on to text. So the more complex and more detailed variant of the story is much more likely to be the less original version.
Kind of a sidetrack. The place that is in Israel that we call the Temple Mount today, do you think that's where the second temple was?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is that part of the temple. So no, let me say no, it wasn't, because that part of the temple where the western wall was in the Temple Mount is a part of the temple that was added on by Herod the Great, the one that was alive when Jesus was born, the one that put the order out for Jesus to be killed. He added a big temple complex onto the original temple, and that's the part that's still standing today, not the actual temple.
Right. So you don't think it was like a Roman? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying the mount is where the temple was.
Okay. Yeah, because some like different theories are like that was where they housed the Roman soldiers that were, the foreign Roman soldiers, and that was, they needed that much space for all this, all the different soldiers or whatever. And there's different theories about where the actual the true temple hill mount or place of the temple was. Something it was like City of David or a number of different places. But I just wanted to know if you thought that Temple Mount is where the second temple, in that complex somewhere, was actually the place where it was.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Herod's wall that is still standing is west of where the temple was. But the Temple Mount was definitely not where the City of David is. The City of David is on Mount Zion.
I wish I had a map and knew the geography, but it seemed like it was downhill, kind of across the street from where the Temple Mount is,
What is?
the city of David or whatever.
Yeah, you're correct. I'm mistaken. The city of David is on the southeast corner of Jerusalem, away from the temple a bit. I was thinking of something else.
But have you ever been there to Israel?
No.
I mean, I would love to go, but anyway.
Me too.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the Gospels and the authorship and stuff. If we go back in John and go back to verse, we have verse 24, this is the disciple that testifieth and wrote these things, blah, blah, blah. We go back to verse 20, Peter's, crying about, well, what's going on with John? What's he going to do? Whatever. And, it's written here, Peter turneth about, seeth the disciple who Jesus loved following, which also leaned on his breast at supper, which would, be the Last Supper, and said, and what is he that betrayeth thee? Right? What does this man do? Blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if he was talking about Judas there or what, if he was talking about basically Peter's jealous, it seems like right there. But, John again refers to himself as the disciple who Jesus loved, leaned on his breast at supper. And if we go back to like John 13 or 14, maybe 15, that's what it says. Like he was leaning on his breast and whatnot. So like that's the connection between that verse 20, 24, and who we know as the disciple of John, who supposedly also wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John and Revelation. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense at all because it never says the name John. It just says that it's Jesus's beloved disciple. And you're saying because it's in the Gospel of John that disciple must be John. But the Gospel, the people that put the name John on the Gospel of John were not there. They have no reason to do that. We have no reason to trust them. These are Roman churches.
But the thing is, it wouldn't matter. Even if it was Andy, if it was the Gospel of Andy, and this would say like, the disciple who Jesus loved, and then it said, this disciple wrote these things, saw these things, testify is true. It wouldn't matter what the name is. We just call him John. So that's kind of almost irrelevant.
Well, it is relevant because it's talking about John, the one of the followers of Jesus. It makes it hugely relevant, whether it's some random person or whether it's a follower of Christ that knew Jesus. That's a huge difference.
Okay, so when you say follower of Christ, is that separate from like a disciple, or are you saying like disciple and the follower of Christ was like that's the same person and then just someone else is different?
Well, I mean, all of his followers were disciples. A disciple is a follower.
Okay.
But yeah, my specific point is that like, was it some random person that never saw these things and is hearing it second, third, and fourth hand, or was it one of the followers of Jesus that actually saw it happen and is recounting events that they saw? We have no way of knowing.
But if
we don't know who they are.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying we have no way of knowing because we don't know who they are. They didn't even write their own material. This is someone else writing for them. This is someone else who has taken it upon themselves to recount whatever this person said. If it's even true, which it's definitely not true.
See, but I have a hard time with that too, because where it says here, this is the disciple that testified of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. I mean, that's almost like first person, like basically he's saying, I was there, I saw these things, I wrote this stuff down, I'm telling the truth. You know what I mean?
Then he would say, I am. He wouldn't say this is that doesn't even make sense. That's not how language works. No one words a sentence like that. He would say, I was there and saw these things. It also says at the beginning of the John that like he gave the information to us. So it's like people, like a group of people wrote John with information according to them, given to them from John. It doesn't matter though.
Probably had a scribe or something. The way
Well,
this reads,
that's not what. It's not saying that John hired a scribe to write what he was saying. It's what's more likely is that John was a preacher, because that's what these people were doing. They were going around preaching to different cities across the nation, or across the ancient Near East, really. But John was preaching, and people or someone was preaching. You know what I mean? Maybe it was John. Maybe it was just someone that heard from John, or someone that heard from someone that heard from John. We have no idea, but someone was preaching under the name of John, and these people took it upon themselves to write down what they heard. Whoever wrote this.
Okay, but if he's also referencing himself as the disciple who Jesus loved, was, laying on his breast at supper, which goes back to the Last Supper when, he was leaning on his breast, as the disciple that Jesus loved. Like that is kind of connecting the whole the book to that said testimony, whether it's John, whether his name is Andy, whatever, that is almost irrelevant because it's the same guy. And then he's declaring like, I saw these things, I'm testifying of it, I wrote these things, whatever kind of thing. And so, when you say the names are made up, it's almost irrelevant because it's the same body.
Yeah, but the point is it's a person, like we don't know who it was that's saying. For one, it doesn't say I wrote these things. Nowhere does it say that in John, because the person that saw the events is not the one that wrote John. It's people that heard from that person that wrote John. In the same way that Luke wrote Luke after hearing from disciples of Christ, or followers of the movement that were witnesses. That's what John is, and it literally implies that in the very opening of John, and all through the gospel too. It's not worded in the first person. It's not being written as if it spoke. Like if you look at Paul's letters, look at how Paul writes in his letters when he's speaking to somebody. When he's writing a letter, he's not saying this person. He's saying I.
Yeah. Certainly in the, Timothy and the, I can't even remember the other ones, the individuals that he wrote to, but, it does still say right there in 24, this is the disciple. That's almost an I, but, that's not the point, because what it's saying is the body that was the beloved, the disciple who Jesus loved, who also leaned on his breast, is the same person that is saying this is the disciple that saw these things and wrote these things and is true. So we know that his testimony is true. We know. Mm-hmm.
The narrator. That means that it's not John speaking. It's followers, multiple. We know. But
it could be. Yeah.
They're getting this from a writing. They're saying that right there. Whoever this is multiple people. The narrator is multiple people that are collaborating to create this gospel that you call John. We don't know who they were. They have heard the testimony of someone claiming to be the beloved disciple. Maybe. I don't even believe that's actually true. I don't believe they heard anything. I believe this is completely made up. But just to entertain your idea, they heard the testimony from somebody claiming to be the beloved disciple of Christ, and they know his testimony is true for unknown reasons. That's all we can derive from this. It says nothing about who that disciple was. And quite frankly, James, Jesus's brother, James the Just, became the leader of the movement after Jesus died. So it seems much more likely that James was the beloved disciple, and that a family member was lying on his breast and not some other guy. Because family members are much more likely to be affectionate like that with one another than strangers or non-family members. So James, there's a lot of reasons why it's way more likely that the beloved disciple was James anyway. But if it was James, you would expect James's gospel to match up with the other gospels, which it doesn't. John's gospel doesn't match up with the other gospels at all. It adds a bunch of like super important miracles that all three other gospels never mention, including Luke, who heard a bunch of testimonies from several followers, and none of them mentioned it to Luke apparently. He words things in ways that all of the other gospels, including apocryphal gospels like Thomas, they give short sayings from Jesus. You know what I mean? Jesus doesn't often speak in long speeches that are super well worded and, go into Platonic theology and beings of light and stuff like that. Like, Jesus never said shit about that. And then you get John's gospel making all these new claims about Jesus. He's damn near saying Jesus is God. Jesus just specifically said he wasn't God in Mark. He specifically said that he wasn't God. And in John's gospel, you basically have him saying that Jesus is God, talking about beings of light, adding on all of this weird, long drawn out versions of the actual sayings of Jesus. It's so clearly a fake. Like, I don't even know why you would care what John says. I would tear it out of my Bible if I was a Christian.
Said the other.
Oh, you're cutting out real bad. No, I can't hear you. You're roboting. It might be because your tab's open. I don't know. The internet tab, try closing that maybe. That uses a lot of... Yeah, just like the whole thing, just like lower it or whatever, minimize it. The entire thing. The whole entire thing.
I got you. Thanks. Like that?
Yeah. Sometimes that causes the audio to lag and
Excellent.
stuff.
Yeah, so I was saying there are parts of John that do correlate with the other gospels, so it's not totally, a fabrication of that's totally, way out there. But also, I wouldn't expect two people or even three people or four or more or whatever to have the same testimony of their own experience. So, I think they're all valid,
But then why would Mark and Matthew and Luke's gospels all match with the quotations in John? Like, the quotation for something in Mark, Matthew, and Luke will be like 1 to 2 sentences, and they all say it the exact same way almost. And then John gives like a whole paragraph of the same quote from Jesus. It's like a whole paragraph when you get to John, and it also changes things.
Well, I mean, just going off of what you said or what John says, that he's the disciple that Jesus loved, like maybe he was more of in the internal circle of Jesus than the other guys that were just kind of hanging out, and like being dazzled or razzled and dazzled or whatever. That could explain it. But going back to John, one thing that when you say it could have been James, and that because of the affection of the leaning on the during the supper and stuff like that, does make a lot of sense. But shoot, now I forgot my freaking question. I always do this with you for some reason. Going back here, like in 24, where it says, you said that it was a group of people or whatever, where it says we, but couldn't it just be John and one scribe when it says we? It could also be just John and just one scribe.
So it says, we know his testimony is true.
Right. So that would be John and one other scribe.
Well, no, because you don't say, I know my testimony is true. You would say that would be someone talking about him.
Right. So, but it only takes one other person to say the we.
When scribes write, you realize like they don't write like John said this. They write like like if John is talking to a scribe, if we're looking at the way that scribes write for people, like examples of people that we know for a fact were illiterate, but we have documentation from them, meaning that they used a scribe. The scribe doesn't say, like if John was saying, I walked out into the street and saw a car. The scribe doesn't say, when the scribe's writing it, the scribe doesn't say, John walked out into the street and John saw a car. The scribe writes it the word for word exactly as John said it, like a court transcriber. They're not like narrating it; they're just writing what they're saying. So if the scribe was writing it for John, we would have them saying I, and not we.
I understand that, but that goes kind of against what you were saying earlier about the validation of the testimony, because when it says this disciple which testified of these things and wrote these things, and the we could literally be him and one scribe, and not a bunch of like guys that were making up a story that made up the John literature, like you were kind of suggesting was the only other possibility. It could be another possibility is it's just John and one other scribe.
That's not possible because it says we in reference to him. It says we know that his testimony is true. So there's one entity that is this him or his, and then there's this other we that knows about this his or him.
Right.
We know that
so
his
you only need one other witness to say
there's at least to have this work, you need at least 3 people. There needs to be 2 people that form a we that both know that the testimony of the beloved disciple is true.
So you're saying that it had to be John, in my scenario, it would have to be John and 2 scribes, or John and 1 scribe and 1 other person.
Well, we know it's not scribes because scribes would have worded it in the first person when they're talking in the when they're talking in the gospel. It would have said, and then me and Jesus and Matthew and Peter all went here. You know what I mean? Like it's never that never happened. So we know it wasn't a scribe. It was a follower of the movement writing down maybe what they heard from somebody, or they might be making it up, which is what I think. What I think is that they never heard anything from anybody, and that they were reading Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and wanted to just put a bunch of Dionysian and Platonic mythology onto Matthew, Mark, and Luke's tradition. It was probably someone that wasn't even involved.
So in the beginning of 24, it says this. Why then didn't it say that? That is the disciple which testify of those things, right? Instead, because the grammar in this sentence is actually all kind of discombobulated, if you look at it.
When it says this is the disciple, it's referring to when just before it was talking about the disciple. Just before that passage in 24, a couple of verses before that, it's talking about the beloved disciple. And so after they get them talking about the beloved disciple, they specify this disciple, this beloved disciple that we were just talking about is where we got this message from, and we know it's true.
Okay, so when it says this, it's almost like saying, I am the disciple which testifieth of these things. That could be, because basically this is referring to like an I. But later in the sentence it says we, which is kind of weird because,
how is this referring to an I? How did you make it there? What are you talking about?
Because why would someone say this is the disciple? Like, why would you say this is the disciple if you're not referring to yourself or to someone else?
I mean, imagine standing next to someone and gesturing to them and saying, this is the disciple. That would make perfect sense. Now imagine being the disciple and saying, and like pointing to yourself and saying, this is the disciple. Nobody talks like that. It's obviously someone else talking about the disciple.
But this could be an I, because if you look at the second part of the second sentence, it says, and wrote these things. So if the guy writing these things is saying this, like pointing at John saying, this is the disciple who testified of these things, he wouldn't then say, and wrote these things, because John didn't write the things according to you.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying.
And we know that the testimony is true.
Yeah, I'm not saying
So
that's what happened. I'm just giving that as an example. He's not saying this is, but when you say this is the disciple, you don't do that when you're talking about yourself. I'm just saying that using this
But you
language.
could.
Why
But you
would
could,
you?
though.
You're saying, but it's unheard of though. That's the thing. Like, and it's completely heard of to do it when you're talking about other people. It makes no sense to come to the conclusion that you're saying, and it makes all the sense in the world to come to the conclusion of what I said.
But if you were to say this is the disciple that testified these things, it's almost like you are presenting that person. You're like, introducing or presenting that person, as opposed to saying that was the disciple or that is the disciple. Instead, it's more of an I, right? And this is the disciple, like as an I am the disciple that testified of these things.
It would just say that, the freak. It would just say that. People talked like that when they were talking about themselves. They said, I am. Like, I don't know why you don't acknowledge that. If it was John would just say, I am the disciple, and I know that what I saw is true. That's what it would say, and it doesn't.
Right, like I said, the grammar is just combobulated.
Listen to freak. Right at the end of John, right? Let me just read it. I can't remember where it is. Anyway, he's talking about the disciple leading up to it, and then in verse 24 it says, "This is the disciple who is testifying these things." So when it says this is the disciple who is testifying these things, it's saying this disciple who I was just talking about. It says, the disciple whom Jesus loved, and just like 2-3 verses prior, it says this disciple, the one who I'm just talking about right now, is the one testifying to us. This is so clear and straightforward. Just look at it. Even my Bible literally introduces this whole, from verse 20 to verse 24, it introduces it as Jesus and the beloved disciple. Like, we know that it's the whole entire thing is talking about the beloved disciple leading up to 24, and then it gets to 24, and it says this is the disciple who is testifying these things, the one we were just talking about for the past 3 verses. Immediately before this, obviously it's talking about that disciple. So it wasn't written by John. Like, you need to get this out of your head, to freak.
I just don't see it that way. I mean, I really don't, because right after it says, and wrote these things, which would imply that John is saying that and he's writing that. The part that I'm getting, the stickler is the we, okay? And we know that his testimony is true. Basically, this could be just like a matter of fact kind of a given at this point, or an assumed given, future participle given of just the acceptance of his writing, I guess. It doesn't make any sense, but the part where it says this is the disciple is basically an I to me, and where it's because the fact that says right after that, and wrote these things.
What does that matter?
Because, like, you're not going to say, present someone as this is the disciple who testified of these things, and then say that and then attribute the writing to that disciple if I'm writing the stuff.
I don't understand what you mean. What's the significance? Like, of say the disciple wrote it down and and there was a gospel circulating, and then these people wrote this. These people wrote the Gospel of John, a separate gospel from what the beloved disciple wrote.
What I'm saying is the fact that it says and wrote these things, and this is the disciple who testifying of these things and wrote these things, has to be the same person.
Okay, if that's the case, if then we know that it's not John. That automatically proves it's not John because John was unlettered. If it says John, if the beloved disciple wrote them down, then that automatically rules John out.
That's where your James theory makes good sense there, and also where they may not. I guess John was very young, so he probably didn't go through the whole rabbinical schooling or whatever. So when it says unlearned, that's not very specific. It just says unlearned, like about about what or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's some doubt there, but to me, it's not enough for me to be weaned off of what I believe, because it's just that he's referencing himself as the person leaning on the breast at the Last Supper. I mean, to me, it all still is cohesive, and it clicks. I mean, clicks is kind of a lame, stupid little cliche word, but it just still holds together.
That it was John.
That it was John, yeah. I don't know if he wrote it, but that it's the same person that is saying, and this specific verse 24 is the same person that's in 20 saying he was the one leaning on the breast, is the same one in John, I don't know, I think 13 or 15, that was leaning on the breast then. And so if that's the case, then the whole rest of the book is probably, John, or whoever the name is attributed to, and so therefore it's a valid gospel, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean that's of course ignoring all of the issues with John that I listed off earlier about how it adds on a bunch of stuff, and it includes miracles that would definitely be mentioned, like super important miracles by Jesus that no one else mentions. It uses long quotes when everyone else, including apocryphal gospels, uses like small, short 1 to 2 sentence sayings from Jesus, like "Truly I tell you," blah 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 blah, like that. That's like cliche Jesus shit. Everyone, people that weren't related are quoting Jesus saying stuff like that. So John is completely inconsistent with the other gospels. It's either the other gospels are all three bullshit, or John is bullshit.
I don't think it has to be that way, because we saw in the whatever Timothy 13, whatever it was, like those guys were kind of separate, doing their own thing, and, hanging out with Paul, cooperating, writing stuff. This is all hypothetical, but we do see that in that letter that Luke and Mark and Paul were probably gathered at least once at for whatever period of time, and so that story is kind of going to be different than John, who also was kind of said to basically take care of Jesus's mother when Jesus was on the cross, like, behold your son, whatever. And so that John was hanging out with Mary a lot, he could have been picking her brain, and so the whole testimony would definitely be different. Like, it would definitely be not the same as the other three guys that were cooperating over in Rome or something. That makes perfect sense to me.
But then why would Matthew, who was a disciple of Christ, give these short little quotes then? Matthew was a witness to Christ. He was around him day to day. Matthew was Levi in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he give these short little quotes that match Mark and Luke, and then John gives these long, drawn-out narratives?
I think I'm going to need an example to compare, because I can't think of anything that, like, I like I said, the reasoning I just laid out is perfectly a good reason for me to think that it's all true still. So, like, if you're telling me that, that, like, I don't know, like, behold, a glutton and a wine bibber, blah, blah, blah. But yet in John, it was like, hey, let's hang out, have a party, turn water into wine, get drunk at a wedding, and, and you're going to call me a glutton and a wine. I would look at that. But just saying that, like, Matthew is short and concise and blah blah blah, no nonsense, right, right to it, and then John is just, fabricated literature, imagination. It's just not, you know, it's just not hit for me. It's not clicking.
Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So
Ooh, no, you just cut out.
I'm sorry. So in Matthew
There you go.
11:27, it
Mhm.
says something to the effect,
Oh shoot, that's what it is.
no one knows the Son except the Father, and or whatever, what verse I'm talking about, right? It's like 2 sentences long, and this matches Mark. Mark gives about the exact same thing. I think Matthew adds on to it a tiny bit. When we get to John, John carries that on for almost 30 chapters. Or 30 verses,
Well,
sorry, not chapters, 30 verses.
Okay. Which chapter is that, John?
It's chapter
Maybe
5,
10.
chapter 5, 19 through 47.
Okay.
Is John's telling of that exact same moment. And he adds all kind of stuff onto it that Matthew and Mark never even said.
Yeah. Okay. So, which was the verse in Matthew? 11 something.
11:27.
Thanks. I think on this one, I'm going to need to write this down, and it looks like a good amount of reading. I don't want to have too much, dead air on the broadcast here, but I'm definitely going to write this down and check it out because, what you're saying doesn't click, but now I'm seeing what you're saying, and I want to look into it because, I don't want to be ignorant of these things either. So Matthew 11, 19, I'm sorry, Matthew 11, 27.
11:27. Yeah.
And John
But
5,
it's
19
when
through something.
it's just like a little thank you moment where Jesus thanks God, and he says, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Right? And Matthew's a direct witness
Yes.
to Jesus. Matthew saw this firsthand, and that's his whole quote. And his quote matches Mark. Or I'm sorry, Luke. And then we get to John, and John goes on about that exact same thing for 30 verses.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I need to look into this. I'm not sure if he's in the temple at this point or if he, so yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. Appreciate that. I just something else that popped into my head about some of the stuff. Damn, hey, when I fucking lose my thought like that.
It's all right.
Oh, so like in excuse me, in John like 15, so, like my favorite part of the Bible is literally John 14 through 17. When we see like the detail of what Jesus was going through, and like they call it the quote unquote passion, whatever part. He's praying to God, and he's telling them a bunch of different things that are definitely not in any of the other gospels. Like, you don't give any validity to that at all? Like, because the prayer from Jesus to the Father before for the disciples and for supposedly the rest of the world that are believers, is pretty intense, and I mean it helps me understand the relationship between them and how Jesus is born as like the Son of God and how he relates trinitarially to the Father.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered that?
Well, I mean, I understand that it's important to Christians, but it's, again, it doesn't, there's no good reason. There's no good reason to assume that this was an actual follower of the movement that wrote this, right? And there's
I
really
mean,
good reasons, there's really good reasons to assume that it wasn't a follower of the movement. So I think you're just being illogical. You want this to be John, you know what I mean? And you're going to do everything you can to make it John. And that's what's happening. I mean, all of the
but
evidence
Andy,
is that this guy could not have been the follower of a movement. It's either that or Matthew, Mark, and Luke are full of shit. That's what it has to
not
be.
really, because you literally kind of correlated Matthew 11:27 to John, 5:19 through 40 or whatever, and so like for someone to just be a free agent, free roamer, making up stuff, literature, out of nowhere, imagination, fantasy land, doesn't correlate. And
Yes, it does. It does, because they probably just had a copy of Matthew or Mark or Luke, and we're like, okay, I'm going to add on to this. So, I mean, obviously they're going to have the same themes that are in Matthew and Mark. You're going to see things that are similar, or it would just be a completely unrelated story.
okay, but what if it was James, like you were saying? Then you're in that dilemma there, and
If it was,
he was. Go ahead.
yeah, if it was James, then Matthew and Mark and Luke are full of shit.
But no, that doesn't mean they're full of shit. It just means that James was the inner circle, blood related or whatever, and
No, it doesn't
maybe
work
knew
that way.
more.
Talking about the same events, the freak. They're both accounting events that they witnessed and giving completely different accounts of the events. It's not like he's talking about some secret information or something that only James or only John got in private. They're talking about the exact same event and giving completely different accounts of how it happened.
Which is the gospel that says basically I could write 50 more volumes of books about all the stuff that we saw or whatever? Is that Luke?
Yeah.
So like, how do we know that even Matthew, even Mark or whatever, like had a whole bunch of other stuff like, written down or whatever, and then they just didn't include it in the final draft?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading. Can you say that again?
So how do we know that Matthew and Mark or even John or even Luke didn't have a whole bunch of other things that they did write down that they just didn't include in the final draft?
Well, again, it's not about what they didn't write. It's about comparing the things that they both have in common. That's what I'm talking about right now. When they give an account of something, when Matthew and Mark and Luke give an account of something, that they're very similar to one another. And then we have John all by itself giving this super strange and long drawn out version of it that has all these very important details that were left out by all the other three gospels, and even like changes the narrative, changes the qualities of Jesus. It's completely different in every way, shape, and form. Like if why would Matthew shorten it to two sentences like that? And why would Mark and Luke also do the same thing? Like Luke is hearing it, so Matthew is shortening John's true account down to two sentences, which is like blasphemous. You wouldn't want to like censor the words of Jesus. You would want to put every word that he said. So we have this one account that has these long drawn out versions, and then we have Matthew's account, who is giving little 2-sentence summaries of it. And then for whatever reason, Luke is getting information from all the followers. He's just some random physician of Paul that shows up. He's hearing about everything that happened from all the followers, and he happens to write it in the same 2-sentence summary that Matthew did, basically. And same with Mark. Mark's an unrelated person who's getting his information directly from Peter, according to Eusebius, which I don't believe, but according to Christian tradition, Mark's getting his information from Peter, Jesus' right-hand man, And even he's giving these same little 2-sentence summaries of Jesus' sayings. And like I said, the apocryphal gospels, like the Acts of Andrew and the Gospel of Thomas, they also, depict Jesus giving short little 2-sentence sayings when he's giving information as well. Like all sources are consistently showing Jesus giving little short sayings that start with, truly I tell you. And then we have John writing stories.
Okay, so if let's just say John is assigned to taking care of Mary, Jesus' mom, as like, I don't know, some sort of like, I don't know, male, I don't know what you would even call it, like he's just like to like, I don't know, ward off the friggin' goats or something, for Mary or whatever. Like, so he was hanging out with mom, and the other three guys were talking with each other, collaborating, running around, killing people, doing whatever they were doing, writing stuff, and that scenario makes sense still.
What do you mean?
What I mean is like those other. Okay, let's just say Matthew had a whole bunch of other stuff that kind of like matched what John wrote or whatever, but since he was collaborating with Luke and Mark, it didn't make it into his final draft because they were all collaborating with each other, and he's like, oh, well, I should cut this fat because it doesn't line up with what Mark and Luke are writing, right? I'm not saying that's the case, but
does that seem likely to you, though? Does that seem at all likely to you that Matthew would do that? This is a follower of Christ that was around him and witnessed these events. He sees John as giving the long, drawn-out narrative version, which is, according to you, the true version, the real version, right? So Matthew and Matthew,
right.
What do you mean?
I mean, I think that they're all true. Like, there's no like.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
to me, you're fine.
You're saying that John's is like the full detail version. I mean, not true.
I mean, for certain parts, like he just has a different testimony. I don't expect them to be the same, but what it shows is like
the same event. If they're witnessing the same event, it should be.
That's true, but John is writing about different things than what the other ones wrote about. So what I need is to have some event that they all kind of had included in them, and I know that there's only a couple that are like in all four, but at least John with at least two others or something of that particular section to compare it to. I've got this one here that you gave me, but it still doesn't mean that John was hanging out with Mary, taking care of her, and these other three guys, at least the two, and Matthew loosely was hanging out, cooperating, writing stuff down, and Matthew could have said, yeah, well, mine doesn't compare exactly with Mark and Luke's, and so I'm going to cut some of the fat out of mine and make it line up with theirs more, and there you go. That explains it.
Why would you do that? Why would you cut some of the fat out? Those are Jesus's words. Why would you cut that out? That makes no sense at all. Nobody would do that.
You cut it out to line up with the other ones that you were having in front, that you were.
If you wanted them to line up, why wouldn't you just say that they were wrong? I mean, if they didn't line up with the truth, why wouldn't you just say, hey, they're not telling a full story here. Like, let me give you the rest of the details. Why you wouldn't trim your story down to match these bullshit stories from non-witnesses, by the way. Mark and Luke are non-witnesses.
Right, but originally you you're saying that Matthew is actually a inflation of Mark in the first place. So you can't have that both ways.
No, I'm saying in your view. It's called an internal critique. I don't hold these beliefs. I'm saying in your view, that's the case. And it can't be.
Well, but okay. My internal critique is that Mark is a summarized version of Matthew. That's my internal critique. I know that no one believes that, but that's what I believe.
That's
Okay,
crazy.
so-
I don't know why you would believe that. That's not how Jewish writing works. It's the exact opposite of how it works, always.
Okay, but that goes against what the truth would be, because if he's adding stuff into what Mark wrote, then out of his imagination or whatever, then that's not truth. That's fabrication or whatever, and that doesn't correlate with what Scripture is overall. In my
I
opinion.
completely agree. It's not truth. What Matthew, everything after Mark is bullshit, in my opinion, because they're adding on things that are probably not true to an already not true story.
Okay, but then
Like-
how do you have those events that are not in Mark, that are very matter of fact or whatever, that are correlating with Matthew and Luke? So that doesn't hold water either, because you're talking about having to be creative, making up stories or whatever, and inserting it into whatever Matthew wrote. I'm sorry, whatever Mark wrote. But that just seems far less likely to me.
Yeah, are you familiar with the Q source?
Aren't those like the Dead Sea Scroll cataloging of
No.
scrolls or something?
No, the Q source is a hypothetical document that has been reconstructed by examining Matthew and Luke. Because as you were saying, Matthew and Luke have information that is not in Mark, but they share with one another. And if you notice, you wouldn't be able to notice, I guess, because you don't speak Greek. And I don't speak Greek either, but people that do speak Greek all unanimously hold this opinion, that Matthew and Mark share information with one another or Matthew and Luke share information with one another that is not in Mark. And the information that Matthew and Luke share with one another is more primitive than what's in Mark.
What do you mean by primitive?
In terms of writing style and theology, it's earlier in the first century style, or earlier than what Mark is written in. Like the concepts are earlier. The material that Matthew and Luke share that is not in Mark seems to have like an earlier tradition than Mark. And so a lot of scholars think that they're not only taking their story from Mark, but they're taking their story from this other source which is referred to as the Q source. Dr. Dennis MacDonald has done extensive work on the Q source, and Robin Faith Walsh also, if you're interested in scholars. They're like specialists on the subject.
Just thinking for a minute. But the fact that I'm just not buying it, because when you see Paul saying, "Luke is with me, send Mark," or whatever, and you're saying that they had different dialects or different primitive types of Greek that they were writing, the timeline just doesn't match up with that. So why would Mark be writing in a more eloquent type of Greek or whatever, and yet some of his story lines up with Matthew, but Matthew is primitive and Luke is primitive? You see, it starts getting all too convoluted for it to be the case.
There's nothing convoluted about it. There's this Q document going around. This is the original gospel, or a more original gospel than Mark's anyway. And so that's floating around. Everyone knows about Q, right? And then Mark comes out, and now everyone knows about Q and everyone knows about Mark. There's two versions of the story now. And so Luke and Matthew are taking these two versions, primarily Mark. Maybe, we don't know how much this Q document lined up with Mark. It could have been very similar to Mark. We're not sure. There was some other source before Mark for sure, though. We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns in the Q source theory, but
at this point, I think my theory that I just made up on the fly right now, that John was literally hanging out, taking care of Mary. The other three were, somehow cooperating and coordinating and copying or doing their own thing and writing stuff. Makes perfect sense as to why those three more are aligned with each other, and John is kind of separated out. But getting back to John, how do we explain Revelation, First, Second, and Third John? You know, and the Gospel of John. Like, in other words, if the Gospel of John is a fraud or whatever, why do we have First, Second, and Third John and Revelation? Where did those come from?
A different author than John, not the same person that wrote the Gospel of John. That's for sure. The person that wrote the gospel, or the person that wrote Revelation, is the same person that wrote First and Second John, probably, and then Third John is a different author altogether. But none of them are related to the person that wrote the Gospel of John.
But the Christian tradition is that it's all John, right? Or am I mistaken there?
No, you're right.
All right.
Yeah, son of Zebedee.
I just think that, all these, it wasn't him. It was, he was a key source. It was, conflation. So how would, if Matthew and Luke read Mark's version and just started making stuff up, how do some of their stuff actually, still correlate with each other if it was false? Because you're not going to have two creative, different artists, writers, whatever, go off on their own and make up stories and then line up like that. Like, they're going to have two separate, whole different things. You're not going to have
I just answered that question. There was a source before Mark that they're also using. So the parts of Matthew and Luke that match up with one another that are not in Mark are coming from that source from before Mark.
Yeah, but you said that source, the Q source is a combination of Mark and Luke. Of Matthew and Luke.
No, I didn't say that. I never said that. The Q source came before the Q source. If the Q source is real, the Q source predates all of the gospel material. Everything. It's the most original source that we know of, if it's real. And Mark may or may not have gotten his material from the Q source, for all we know. We have no idea where whoever wrote Mark, got their material from. But it could have been from this Q source, or it could have been just an original work expanding on the Q source, kind of like what Matthew did to Mark. But I'm saying that Matthew and Luke are getting their material from this pre-Mark source.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So the Q source could have been the inspiration for all three of them. All three spawns, kind of, and then maybe they, collaborated and put a final draft or whatever. That makes more sense than what you were saying earlier, which I think maybe I did misunderstand. So
and this is very consistent with people doing. Like, people did this all of the time with religious literature during that time. You would constantly add on to the story to not only to fit your culture. Like, say you're more Jewish or you're more Gentile or you're more Roman, you're going to write a different gospel, having Jesus gearing his teachings towards those kind of ideas. But oh shoot, my headphone's dying. Go ahead with
I hate that.
Me too.
Did you happen to see the beginning of this video where I was showing our friend RP over on Gretchen's stream, talking about the waveform, whatever they call that?
Maybe.
The whatever. What do you think about what I said?
I don't know, but I saw it.
Basically, he was saying that he's able to score a 135 on the IQ test, even in an inebriated state online.
Mm-hmm.
But then when this other guy was telling him about the waveform, and I forgot the name that they used for that like overall like topic, but it had to do with like the universe being kind of like the God, like as God, this waveform, wavelength waveform type of essence of the universe, being the final like base, of the particle plane or whatever, basically the fabrication of the universe, but yet Arpy couldn't understand what he was saying.
Oh, I don't know. He misunderstood him. I don't know. I think people with high IQs can misunderstand people.
I mean, I guess, but apparently, like Arpy is even like a buyer into, like he supposedly knows this stuff, and is like that's what he believes, right? Like he believes that the wavelength, the waveform, whatever physical plane is the explanation of the universe. So this other guy was telling him that, okay, yeah, that's true, and we agree on the waveform stuff, but I think it could be spiritual. And then all of a sudden, Arpy goes dumb and is like, well, I don't understand. Okay, but you just said you had a 135, and he blamed it on like being inebriated, just like he was inebriated on the IQ test, right? But now all of a sudden, wouldn't that indicate to you that maybe there's more of a motive, of an outside motive to not believe? Like he has a reason, as you know, a reason not to believe, like maybe he's getting paid or something. Is that far fetched?
The freak. That is so far fetched. I don't even know what to say. Like he just didn't understand the guy. There's not a lot more to it than that. RP was drinking and just didn't understand the guy. Like for instance, I've been drinking, but in the past, and I play pool. I'm a really good pool player, and there's been times when I've been drinking. My grandpa plays on a competitive league. He's been playing pool his entire life, and he's way better than me at pool. And there's been times when I've been inebriated and been able to beat my grandfather because I was like so on fire because of my alcohol abilities. But then there's been other times when I could barely walk down the fucking stairs because of how drunk I was. So it just kind of varies from how much you've had to drink. All RP's saying is that when he was drinking, he was 3 drinks in and scored a 135 on the IQ test. Right? But he doesn't understand what this guy's talking about when he says that the wave function can be spiritual. And I quite frankly don't either. I don't know how you could come to that conclusion. So RP was probably just like, what?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just thought it was, like and I think he is a very intelligent man, and I have nothing against him. He's a very, he's got a lot of, he's a very dignified man, right? But I just found it a little peculiar that like this is his wheelhouse, and he couldn't understand what the guy was saying, even though the point was congruent and coherent. And so it made me think, like, the only reason why he couldn't understand that, or a reason why, would be that there's some sort of other influence going on here. I was just wondering what you thought about that.
No, I
Maybe
think
I was being paranoid.
You're being paranoid. Like for instance, I oppose the Bible. I don't think that the Bible is true. I don't think that it's a good set of teachings. I think that it's harmful to society. And I mean, you'll have to take my word for it, of course, but I can assure you nobody's paying me to take these beliefs. I genuinely hold these beliefs. I care deeply about, I care deeply about people understanding religion for what it actually is and how it started and what it actually means instead of what it's evolved into.
Well, but why do you think that it's harmful for, like, society or the world or whatever? Like, what is it that makes you think it or the followers of it are causing harm per se? Like,
well, I mean, you can take religious wars for example. Like people kill each other over religious differences because of biblical differences. And that's just human nature. That's not going to change. And when you have, if people have differences in life, they don't really, it doesn't really go that far. But when you have differences and God comes into the picture, and you both think that God is telling you to do this, but you both have completely different views on what God is saying, that's where war comes in. And this has happened hundreds of times throughout history. It's still happening today.
okay, so if it wasn't God, I mean, I don't think mankind needs much of a reason to like fight and war with each other. But I do agree with you that yes, the past has been riddled with those things. Now, if we could set that aside, what else, like, do you think is harmful about, you know, the Bible or whatever religion or whatever, or the followers? Like, how else are they harming the rest of society?
Well, I mean, by harming, I mean, okay, so from my perspective, these things are clearly not true. These things are provably not true that's in the Bible, many things. So teaching these things as truth to a kid, and misinforming a child, in my opinion, is child abuse. So, and this is just one example. Let me think of other examples. I mean, you can look at Christian nationalism, for example.
A lot of what I hear from atheists is like, that Christians or religious people, they, want to oppress women. They want to, delete and oppress, homosexual people or like, even extreme, like, eugenics or whatever. Like, but these are just absurd kind of claims because we see that a lot of Christianity is starting to I wouldn't say necessarily outright accept, but like they're not like harsh on the homosexual aspect as they used to be in the past, And also we see that the marriage laws are not discriminating against gay people anymore. So like I don't see how that could be used against these people. And um, as far as the Christian nationalism and the women's thing, the voting thing, I think that's wrong. I don't think it's even possible or feasible. Like women own property now. Like there's no way they're not going to be voting. So I think that's literally just a pipe dream. So their movement is going nowhere, in my opinion. So what do you think about that?
Whose movement?
The Christian national, like, whatever it is, like, I don't even know what the definition is. Like, I don't think anyone really knows what it is because it just seems to be whatever, I don't know, Andrew Wilson or whoever is on a whim that day is saying about it. Like, there's no real definition that I've seen yet.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, Christian nationalism is kind of like a forced push to turn everybody into a Christian in the United States. And that's real. That's very real.
A forced push? Like, what do you mean forced push? Like starting like indoctrinating in education or something else?
A lot of different things. So like passing laws is one thing. They've passed laws to silence atheists. They've made it federally illegal. They've classified anti-Christian speech as domestic terrorism now. So you can be held in a domestic terrorism. You can be held in prison for domestic terrorism, technically, if they want to arrest you for it, and for just speaking out against the Bible. So, I mean, and that's on our first right, by the way. Our first constitutional amendment protects us from that, but they overstepped that boundary anyway.
Isn't that part of like quote unquote like hate speech, or this is whole new like legislation or whatever? And also, is that also a factor like anti-Semitism, or is it different?
Christianity is not an ethnicity or it's not a race. It is a belief, and you are allowed to speak out against other people's beliefs. It's called protesting. It's been legal since the foundation of our country.
Right. That's what I'm always crying about when I get mooted out of these channels. Like that's exactly what I say. So yeah, I understand that. It's un-American. That's definitely un-American. Like that's the principle of America is like the First and Second Amendment, basically, in my opinion. Yeah. But
Donald Trump's the one that passed that law just this past year.
A federal law?
A federal law under Pam Bondi's guidance that all anti-Christian speech is considered domestic terrorism. There's a bunch of other blanket stuff that limited speech as well. But yeah, that's one of many examples.
Sorry. So you're talking about like an executive order or something that Congress passed?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know it's a law. Like it was passed as a law. I'm not sure
Does this have
I know
anything to do with labeling certain groups as, domestic terror or as a terrorist organization or whatever? Is it tied into that?
Yeah, they're labeling people that they don't like as terrorists so that they can attack them illegally. Well, legally now that they've changed the law. See,
Right. So,
that's how you infringe on free speech, because there is a way that free speech is still considered illegal, and if it's harmful. So now they're saying things that are they're just picking things that are completely harmless and saying they're harmful, so that they can classify it as terrorism, so that they can infringe on your constitutional rights, which have always been God-given in this country. We've always been allowed to speak our mind about other religions or anything. Now we're
right.
not allowed to.
Yeah. Like I say, yeah, I'm Christian, but I'm also American. I should have I shouldn't have to curtail my speech about ideology, because feelings of, right. But I deal with that a lot on YouTube. And so, yeah, I understand that is an issue. What I want to know is, if someone is doing that against Christianity or the Bible per se, um, and they're not part of, like, let's just say Antifa or some other one of these whatever groups that are being now called terrorists or whatever, is that person also likely to face legal consequences, or you have to be part of this group? And if you're talking about bad about the Bible, do you know how that works?
It doesn't specify. Any speech, any anti-Christian speech can be classified as domestic terrorism. That's the whole point of them passing the law that's this way, is that they can leave it up to their own discretion instead of following the law.
Yeah, I'm not for that at all. Like, free speech is it's un-American to do, any kind of curtailing of ideology, in my opinion, because culture changes, ideology, things become known or not known. It's just un-American, right? So I agree with you. Like, that's definitely not a good thing. But I'm definitely ignorant about that. So I would need to research it more, but I don't know if that's part of the Christian nationalism, quote unquote, political party, if there is even one being formed, or whatever ideology that you're talking about. Because, like I said, even when Andrew Wilson was debating Kurt on Taco's channel, I uh, basically super chatted, like, define Christian nationalism, and the guy literally would not. He just redirected. Like, I've not gotten a definition of the thing, except other than maybe they want to repeal the 19th Amendment, and maybe they want to pass laws and also try to encourage nuclear family policy, something like that. That's really it. It's like very vague, except for the 19th Amendment thing. And it just seems like it's dead in the water to me. Like, it's almost like the Tea Party. Like, it's even less than the Tea Party.
Yeah, well, as someone who spends a lot of time, as you already know, talking to Christians every day, I promise you it's not a rare occurrence. There are a very large percentage of the Christian population are Christian nationalists, and pushing for forced Christianity on the country is not the only thing that they're doing. Many of them are also extremely anti-Semitic and, anti-Black, anti-Mexican, anti-gay. They don't like any kind of minority groups. That's a common theme that I see among these people when I talk to them.
So are these like English only, make English the official language types?
Yeah, Americans.
I mean, but well, are we talking about like the Andrew Wilson gang, or the Jay Dyer gang and the Jim Bob gang, or like, is it more widespread? Like, is it more than just the Ortho Bros?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those guys. I know of all of those names, but I've never watched content from any of them.
Yeah.
It's just people that I talk to one-on-one.
Yeah, yeah. Are they Orthodox, or are they all all across the board?
Yeah, all across the board. A lot of
What else
Orthodox
about Christian
Protestant.
nationalism like is like that you've noticed is concerning?
The support for the military in the streets, like the support for military invasion of our country. There's no opposition from Christian nationalists about that.
Huh. You mean using the military as the police force or something?
Exactly.
You mean, right? Uh,
Yeah, I'm super
like
against that.
yeah, I mean, that would be like a federal police state, like centralized authority, non-federal. That's totally against the Constitution. Like, I don't know. They must be smoking crack because there's no way that's going to happen. Like,
It's happening right now. It's literally been happening for the past year, and it's a growing cause, and it's a serious problem. And not only is it happening, but the major social media platforms like YouTube, for example, is one of them, are not, how do I say this? They're not promoting the videos about the ICE raids and stuff across the United States like they stopped. Like you can still look them up on YouTube if you search for them, but they're not putting it in people's feeds intentionally.
gotcha. Yeah.
And so if you look
I
at a
don't think I
map
ever
of,
got any of those feeds. But
well,
anyway,
there was a time when they were constantly showing on YouTube, and now they're not, despite ICE being even worse of a problem than it was at that time. And maybe that's partially because people just quit caring about things after a week nowadays. But I think that if you look at a map of the Republican and Democratic population map in the United States, and then look at a map of where Trump sent ICE, like all of the ICE operations that are in the United States, they're the same. The ICE literally only went to Democratic areas. It has nothing to do with race. They're using race because they know that most Mexicans are going to be Democrats because Trump has said so much anti-Mexican rhetoric that most of them don't like him. So they're using the race as a way to move into Democratic areas and reduce populations of Democrats in hopes that they'll win the election, which they're going to end up cheating to win anyway. It doesn't matter.
um, okay, so we put aside the old religious wars. We put aside now we can put aside the weird kind of unlikely, like no probability political wish list. How else would you say religion in our country or whatever, or the Bible or the followers are hurting other people? Would you
Well,
say?
I've given you several reasons already.
Yeah,
I've already given
yeah.
you several reasons. It's child abuse for misinforming children. We have large groups of people that are punching down on minority groups in our country and repealing free speech laws.
Yeah, but this isn't a direct correlation to Christianity or to religion. Like this is political. This is a political theater or arena. Like it's definitely separate.
It's exclusively by Christians, though.
Okay, wait. So when ICE is raiding a Democrat city or whatever, it's because the Christians are oppressing Democrats.
No, I'm saying the entire Republican Party. Like I would be willing to bet it's over 80%, maybe over 90% are Christians, and so all of their values in life are derived from the Bible. Would you disagree? Christians, their values in life are derived from what the Bible says.
For Christians, yeah.
Right. So all of them are for this. All of these Republicans.
I would disagree with the percentage of Republicans being that high because a lot of Republicans just want to keep more money in their pocket, and it's more about economics, and they're not believers at all. It's a high percentage of Christians, probably yes, but I wouldn't say it's 90% or even 80%. Well, maybe 80%. You know,
Right, but without the support of the Christians, they wouldn't have any power.
yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that. But you can't say that their belief in the Bible or Jesus or whatever is causing them to want to deliberately go and oppress other people that are.
I didn't say
even
that.
they might be Christian or whatever.
I didn't say that.
So we could take that political part out of it, just like we took the war part out of it. And okay, let's just say, like, you want to say child abuse. Well, the problem is now you're talking about the way people raise their kids, and if we don't allow parents to raise their kids in whatever ideology that they are, now we're talking about, state imposed indoctrination or whatever. Now we're getting into what you're saying the Christian nationalists want on the other side, though. Like, it's never good to have the state install the ideology of your kids, right? So there's nothing that you could really do about if they want to abuse their kids like that. Unfortunately, you have to let them. I mean,
Well, I'm not talking about what's legal and illegal. I'm talking about what's right and what's wrong. It's wrong to abuse children.
But it's also wrong to not allow parents to raise their children in the ideology that they want to.
Yeah, I disagree. If you're abusing your child with the way that you're raising them, it should be wrong. It should be illegal.
Okay, so do you think Christianity and religion, and as a whole overall, needs to be legally eliminated or banned, or somehow eradicated from the whole zeitgeist?
Not through legal processes, through understanding. I believe that through understanding the Bible, people can leave Christianity and Judaism and Islam. I think the only way that the Bible survives is through people misunderstanding it. It would already be written off as bullshit if people understood it properly. I feel the exact same way about you. I think that if you had a proper understanding of the Bible, you wouldn't hold the beliefs that you have.
So one of the things I noticed with a lot of different atheists is there's like a real sense of urgency to kind of eradicate, religion and Christianity, like it's a life or death proposition. Like if we don't get them, like we're gonna die tomorrow. Like they express like a fear for their life. And to me, that seems like a overreaction, and I want to understand why they feel that way.
I don't feel that way. I don't know why they feel that way. I don't think that Christianity should be illegal. I think that everyone should be allowed to practice Christianity. I think that the problem comes from people that practice Christianity want everyone else to follow their beliefs too, because that's what the Bible says.
I don't know if that's exactly like what the Bible says, but I think, Christians are, everybody wants like a uniformity in that regard, like, because they are just, kind of predisposed to their own kind of culture, prevailing, I guess you could say, for, in the future. But that's the Christian's fault, not necessarily the scripture's fault. If that makes any sense. But also, I think that, the Roman Catholic Church of the Dark Ages or whatever, and even in the colonial times of, England and America, and like that proved to us that as humanity, like, the separation of church and state is a good thing. It's, it's almost a must. It's, you can't govern by the theology of the day or of the era, because it causes too many problems. And especially nowadays, like, there's so much going on. There's so many, we're all so busy, and there's all so much stimulus and so many things to deal with. there's no way a man of God could be like governing and have communication or be, you know, in communion with God at the same time. Like that's an impossibility. There's just not enough time in a day. So like, you know, for Christian nationalists to even think that they can impose some sort of theological influence into state governments now, like they should just be part of the state government and not be trying to theolize, I guess if that's the right word, or religionize government. Like at that point, at this point, it's like it's futile, in my opinion. What do you think?
Hey, I think it's not futile. I think they are pushing religious influence into our government, and it's happening, and there's no stopping it. I think they've already passed several laws in that direction, and they're only going to continue.
What else are they pushing for?
Well, like they're against abortion. Abortion, of course, is Jesus opposed abortion in the Bible, and so all Christians are against abortion. Or no, wait, I'm sorry, Jesus opposed divorce. My bad. But Christians view abortion as murder, and murder is illegal according to the Bible. So Christians are anti-murder for that specific reason, and so there have been laws passed against abortions, and abortions are, I'm sure, as you know, oftentimes medically like.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and that's true. So I can't. There's really nothing I could say. You know, I'm actually pro-choice, surprisingly. You know, I don't think that. I don't think. You know, I base it off of what is said in Scripture about the breath of God, that becoming a living soul or whatever. So like, to me, until a baby takes his first breath, it is not its own agent. It is not independent. And so I'm pro-choice. So anyway, what else? Is there anything else? Like, is it something like, because like when we're talking about like the Ten Commandments being in the schools or something like that, is like, that is like so minuscule, like as an issue. Like, I'm just wondering if there's anything else, or why I see so much like fear and dread from the atheist side when you talk about Christian nationalism, which I think is a joke, by the way, in terms of what they are, I guess, politicizing a party around. I think Christian nationalism should be the spirit of a country, but a political party just doesn't make any sense. What else besides just not believing or like just, I don't know, even just hating for no reason people who have faith, policies or whatever that is driving them to be so, to me, just basically, what do I say? Just basically just willing to, literally be uncivil just to oppose Jesus Christ.
Who's opposing Jesus? What are you talking about?
Well, like, unbelievers or atheists will basically, they want to bring down the institution, and they want to bring, see Christianity go away or whatever. And they hate Christians, call us names, will be, nasty and everything else. And I just don't see why such a personal hatred for individuals is correlating with the political ideology of Christian nationalism, or even from their ideology side, being on the left or whatever. Why they're so basically angry at us, like I don't see how we're hurting that.
It's because all throughout history, Christianity has oppressed people in order to maintain its control. You know what I mean? We believe Christianity is true. If you don't believe it, you will be persecuted. That's always been the case throughout history. And it's happening in the United States today.
You know, I mean, I just wonder because like when I was not a Christian and I was living, you know, a secular life, like it wasn't I mean the secular life was consuming my whole life. Like I didn't have to worry about, you know, what the Christians were doing or what the left was doing. I was just doing my own thing, right? So it's like I don't see how there's any infringement of Christianity into the secular verse. You know, the like we have the panel verses, like the secular verse. Like I don't see an infringement that is causing so much backlash towards our side.
It's nothing that the Bible is doing. It's what the people that believe the Bible are doing. That the Bible doesn't necessarily, or the New Testament at least, according to Christians, even though they're super wrong about it, doesn't prescribe anything wrong. It's what the people are doing. It's not whether or not the Bible tells them. It's just that Christians in general are oppressing people, and the reason that they are is derivative of the Bible, derivative of teachings from the Bible. And when Jesus isn't, you know, evil or hateful enough, they'll quote the Old Testament.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Like people will do and say anything to like prove their point or whatever. Like that goes for anybody, you know.
Yeah, and the
Depending
Bible
on
can do that. You can make any point proving the Bible because of how long of a book it is. So if you want to invade a country, or if you want to, you know, revoke rights from innocent people, or you want to, you know, drop bombs from the sky on innocent people or something, you can find a verse in the Bible that makes it seem like it's okay. And Christians have done that all throughout history. They do it today. They give Isaiah verses talking about how, you know, no one who raises up a sword against the Lord will have success or whatever like that. They literally put those verses on their fucking tanks as they roll into innocent people's neighborhoods, shooting down libraries and schools.
Yeah, I agree with you. Can't refute that. All right, so it's basically you know how like if you go to invest at a stock marketplace or whatever, they say, you know, past performance is not indicative of future results or whatever. So basically they're just a lot of like say leftists, Democrats, whatever, they're looking at like old past history and just creating a fear narrative about what could happen. And it causes them so much anger that they are willing to almost like literally uh you know, have a nation, a seceded nation, to basically, you know, be able to coexist without the bloodshed. Seems like, and to me, it just doesn't make sense because I see Christians as passive and like, you know, benevolent, very passive, like, you know, not aggressively, like, you know, on an individual, like down home, you know, regular, everyday, average Joe type, you know, kind of life coexisting with secularism, right? But a lot of atheists I encounter, maybe not just atheist, maybe not atheists, but like maybe atheists that have gone into like leftist ideology or communist ideology are very like, you know, willing to do whatever it takes to make sure they get their way, kind of a thing, and it's just concerning to me as well. So.
Well, I think the reason that they want to get their way is because they don't want to be oppressed by Christianity for the 500th time in history.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fair stance. You know what I mean?
I
Like
mean, I can accept that, you know.
It's generally Christians that are, you know, they don't like blacks, they don't like Mexicans, they don't like gays, they don't like Jews, they don't like anything that's anything that's outside of what they would consider biblically normal. And the other group, the atheist group, or you could just say the left or the Democrats or whatever, you know, that sort of type of people are way more accepting of others, and they just let people be. They let people be what they are. If they're different, they expect to be left alone. And Christians are not about that lifestyle. They want people to be normal, and if you're not normal, they're going to try to make your life hard. And that's why I don't like them. Not that I shouldn't say I don't like them, but I think that like they're harmful for society, and that reason is that they want to oppress people. They want to halt progression.
Well, I
And
think it's
I don't think they're passive either.
I think it's unfair to say like Christians, they don't like Hispanics, they don't like because like blacks, Hispanics, they are Christians as well. So
Yeah,
you know,
Christians hate other Christians all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not fair to say like it's the Christian thing to hate or not to like blacks to not to like this. You know, that is kind of separate from Christianity. They may use Christianity for their propaganda, like you said, to roll in the tanks, but that's not as a Christian thing because we know that there's a very large percentage of there's a significant percentage of African American and Hispanic believers, and so that kind of negates that point.
Yeah, I'm not saying all Christians are. I'm not saying that
No, I
all
understand.
Christians hold beliefs. I'm saying that
like the Christian nationalists.
I'm saying when you see that sort of behavior, it's almost always coming from Christians. You know, hold on.
Well, the other thing I would say is like we as believers, as believers, know that if we believe that God exists and we know that God created all people, it's not in our nature to hate other people because we know that God created them. So when you say that the left side, the Democrats, they accept people for who and what they are, and live and let live. I believe that's the way the Christians are or the believers are too. So. It's like
not
we should all be that way.
That's what it should be. But then when you see Christians operating in real life, they're in bars punching people in the face and selling drugs, and you know what I mean? Like there's nothing innocent about them. They're just normal everyday people. They commit crimes, they do wrong things, they do evil. And it's a lot of that has to do with thinking that all of their sins are just automatically forgiven. You know what I mean? There's no consequence. When you look at the Jews, their life is very strict. They believe that God will punish them if they break his laws, and they live their life according to those laws all the time. You're not going to see a Jew trying to fuck your wife or, you know what I mean, eating shellfish because they know that God will punish them. It's different with Christians. Christians think they get away with everything. And so we see Christians, in gangs. We see Christians killing people, raping people, stealing from people, all kinds of stuff. My Aunt Elsa was kidnapped from an adoption agency when she was 1 year old and kept prisoner in a basement of a church until she was 18 years old, being raped and abused by a pastor and his wife and a bunch of other people from the church as well.
Wow. That's some pretty extreme stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, to a lot of people in America, especially, they'll say they're Christian, but they don't even, I think that most, like if you were to put a survey in front of them and say, okay, which religion do you identify with? And like it was Islam, Christianity, Judaism, whatever else, Hinduism, whatever else, like they would basically automatically just as a default Christianity because like that's just, they know Christmas, right? And they know basically that's it. Like they know Christmas, right? So like they're not even really Christian in terms of like the lifestyle or the true ideology. They're just like default blue pill matrix kind of cultural Christians.
That's
So
most
those people, if you're, yeah, well, maybe it is. Actually, maybe it is. But like to say like Christians are like going in and beating up your best friend in a bar and being, rambunctious and, raping and whatever. Like, I don't, that's not in the nature of a true follower of Christ, because we know that he was, always preaching not that stuff, right? And same with
Right.
with Judaism. Like it's not a, it's supposed to be a the intent is to not hurt people, basically.
Right. So like my aunt, for an example, her preacher, I'm sorry, her her kidnapper who raised her in sexual abuse in the basement of a church. He was obviously a pastor. He knew every word of the Bible by heart. He forced her to recite Bible verses while he sexually abused her. You can actually look this up. Her name's Elsa Garcia. She's given a story on a bunch of different news networks and stuff, talking in depth about it. But they broke her arms, they knocked her teeth out, they stabbed her, burned her, everything you could imagine. And these were people that were deeply familiar with the teachings of Jesus. There was a church. Everybody there. It was like one of those like creepy church cults. You know what I mean? Where everybody like lives there, and it's like a commune kind of thing. They were all very like their entire life was revolved around the teachings of Jesus, and they molested and beat and stabbed and raped and burned my aunt for 18 years.
Yikes.
So I don't think that understanding the teachings of the Bible has anything to do with your behavior. You'll still do it.
Yeah, well, that's an example anyway. Do you know who Joyce Meyer is? She's like
I don't think
a
so.
TV evangelist, minister lady. Like that sounds exactly like her testimony, as a matter of fact, with her dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she's big time Christian, and like her dad was, I don't know if he was a believer or not, but the same kind of scenario where definitely sexually abused, all throughout her childhood until became an adult, whatever. Said it affected her marriage, and it was. But I don't discount or dismiss like that could happen and how terrible it is. So anyway, just wanted to say that.
Yeah, but my point is, not only are most Christians fake Christians that have never even read the Bible, almost all Christians that I run into don't actually understand the Bible or know the fundamentals of the Bible. But not only that, but being an actual Christian and truly believing the teachings of Jesus also doesn't stop you from doing horrible shit.
What do they understand? Just like, oh, Jesus paid for my sin. I don't have to, whatever, I can do whatever. And I'm going to be saved, or, is that like their understanding? And
Right. Everybody has a different understanding of what Jesus taught, is what you need to realize. Like Christians don't agree. I think that all Christians don't understand the teachings of Christ. Literally all of them. Every single denomination of Christianity does not understand the teachings of Christ. The teachings of Christ, in my opinion, were strict Judaism. That's exactly what Jesus taught, and he said it several times. And the only thing that he changed about the Jewish laws were the abortion laws, the dietary laws, and the Sabbath laws. Everything else he said to uphold until Judgment Day. And he's super clear about it. And like the terms he uses are like repeated through the whole Bible. And we know exactly what he was talking about, but Paul came along and changed everything. And that's why I wanted to, this is a good example, by the way. I got this little pamphlet when I was walking home the other day. I live really close to my work, so sometimes when it's nice, I walk home. So I was walking home from my job, and this woman walks up to me and she hands me this little pamphlet. And she's like, I just wanted to give this to you. And I look at it. It's about the size of a business card. It says, "The Gospel, Plain and Simple," on the front of it. I was like, oh, cool. I like Bible stuff. Thanks. And I went on my way. I got home, I opened this thing, and I start leafing through it. Every single page of this little pamphlet is only a quote from Paul. It's only Romans and Corinthians as well. The entire thing, every single page is a different quote from Paul, but the front of it says the gospel plain and simple. If that isn't a spitting image of Christianity today, I don't know what is. People have completely abandoned the actual teachings of Christ for what Paul taught. And quite frankly, Paul is exactly what Jesus warned about. Paul is quite literally a prophet coming in the name of Jesus when Jesus said, "Do not listen to them. I have already told you everything." It's so painfully obvious to me that Paul is corrupting the religion and nobody sees through it.
I mean, Jesus did reveal himself to Paul, though. So.
Oh, right. According to Paul.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But we see that he was also with Luke and Mark. So but the pamphlet saying the gospel and then preaching Paul, that definitely seems strange to me. Like that.
So I think it's funny. The only person that's saying that Paul is around with Luke and Mark is Paul and Paul's right-hand man, Luke. Matthew and Mark never mention Paul. Their narratives continue after Jesus' death, but for some reason, Paul, who gives all of these new teachings that they had already witnessed, you know what I mean? They're writing this stuff after Paul's teachings when they wrote their Gospels. They already witnessed everything Paul did. They're with him in the stories, so we know that they witnessed what Paul did, and they have no mention of that. Think about that.
About in the gospel, no mention of it in the gospel or something else.
Precisely. In Matthew and Mark, we have Matthew and Mark who were with Paul. Maybe not Matthew. I mean, he probably was, but Mark for sure was, according to Luke. So we have people that were with Paul, and they give the whole story of the Jesus movement from beginning to end, and don't mention Paul.
Well, I mean, I think the fact that Paul was after the resurrection and everything, like he shouldn't be like he came after everything. Like he wasn't walking around or anything. Like he wasn't hanging out, right? So that
doesn't matter. It's a continuation of the story, and it gives new teachings that Jesus didn't give. So if Paul was out there saying that, and they were, you know what I mean, if they were with him, we would expect them to at least mention the name of Paul. I mean, let alone Paul had a whole new vision from Christ that gave all these new teachings, and he started this whole new movement, and they don't even mention him. They were with him, don't even mention him.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, but that still doesn't. I mean, if we're talking about the Q source or whatever, then it makes sense, right? Like they wouldn't be mentioning Paul because he wasn't, part of that or whatever, and not part of that source. But I do see what you're saying in terms of, they were cooperating, like I say, they were in that one verse and not. You see, but that's the thing, like that's what the book of Acts is for, though. Like, linearly, the Gospels didn't include Paul. Like he wasn't part of it. So for them to not mention him isn't that big of a deal. But for that church to hand out a pamphlet and say the gospel simple, the simple gospel, which Paul, in my opinion, is like advanced Christianity. Like he's talking about the literal, things of the Spirit and the Holy Spirit and having the indwelling of the Spirit and stuff like that. That's like more advanced Christianity than just learning the gospel. So that is strange, but
let me ask you this: if Jesus if Jesus is gonna send Paul new revelations after he dies, why would he tell his followers not to listen to any prophets coming in his name because he already told them everything?
I don't think that. Well, wait a second. I think this was addressed in Acts though, with Peter and James, and like they had to test Paul, like to see if he was still going to be killing Christians or whatever, and like somehow I can't remember exactly, but like he met with the leadership there, Peter, James, whatever, and they like tested him or whatever, and they accepted him into the fold and knew that he was of Christ because of like either what he said or like I don't know, somehow like there was a reconciliation, right? And I can't remember exactly how it went down. I think it's in Acts, but that would explain it. And of course, when Jesus gave the vision to Paul, he said, he was going to be sent to the Gentiles or whatever, and like that was like his, purpose for him being in the insider group now, even though he didn't hang out in Jerusalem all that much. Like, he was out and about all over the place.
Right, but when Jesus warns about false prophets and false messiahs coming in his name, he gives a commandment. Jesus gives a commandment to his followers. Do not listen to them. It's not optional. That's a commandment. Do not listen to them. He orders you, do not listen to them. I have already told you everything. And then Paul does exactly what he warned about.
Interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
My pastor didn't accept the teachings of Paul growing up. I went to a Lutheran church, by the way, St. Paul Lutheran Church. The church literally has Paul in the name, and they were very obsessed with Paul's teachings. But my pastor from my church was the first person I ever met in my life that was a Christian but didn't believe in the teachings of Paul. So it's not that uncommon. This was back in the 90s. Well, it would have been like around the year 2000 probably.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm going to need to ponder on why, because Jesus did say that, but he said there would be many. He didn't say there would, they would all be, but that's kind of a stretch too. So like, but
yeah.
like,
I mean, nobody. If you listen to what Jesus said, he's saying, don't listen to anyone coming to give you teachings from Jesus. I already told you everything. That's all he's saying. It's not any more complicated than that.
But isn't Jesus saying that like, if someone says, that I have come, not just in the name to like preach the gospel, but like I am he, I am I am the second coming, I am
that's how he begins.
I am the right, like
but he begins by saying that he's talking about people will come saying I am he, but then as he carries on, he says many false prophets and false messiahs will come speaking in my name. Do not believe them, for I have already told you everything. So does somebody who's saying that, do not believe anyone coming in my name, I already told you everything, but would that person then go visit Paul and give him a vision? That makes no fucking sense. He already warned all of his followers not to listen to people like Paul.
well, that doesn't make sense. That definitely doesn't. But I need to read up a little bit on the whole Paul phenomenon and like how he got inserted there, because that definitely, and I believe like that doesn't make any sense. Does it?
It's the vision.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's the vision.
Other than they lost a guy, other than they lost one of the main 12, like the sixth man got I don't know, killed in a car crash or something. They need to replace a guy. Other than that, it doesn't make any sense. So I need to read up on that.
Well, what makes sense to me is that when you examine Paul is highly educated, for one. He's from Tarsus. Tarsus was an education center in the ancient Levant. Two, he's a Roman citizen. Three, he's a Pharisee. These are all self-admitted, by the way. Highly educated Roman Jew who is a Pharisee and who had spent years growing in the ranks by persecuting Christians. And so he's around these groups, obviously. He's highly intelligent. He's of Roman origin. He's a Jew and he's a Pharisee, so he's clearly against these people. And I want you to think about this. Like, a Pharisee is not going to change their mind. But I mean, obviously, the story is from Paul is that he had a vision from Jesus, which contradicts what Jesus said. So I don't believe the vision story at all. But he's not going to change his mind about his beliefs about the Torah. The Jews were very strict about the law. So this guy's around Christians. He's persecuting them, right? But he sees a growing movement that he can capitalize on and make a bunch of money and gain power and authority. And that's exactly what he did.
I mean, I don't know if that was like the reason, because he also had to deal with a bunch of, like, you know, basket dropping and like persecution and jailing and whatnot. So like there was no real glory in being Paul, but the fact that Jesus did say that, and then, you know, Paul having the vision, I need to close that gap for in my own mind, but
Well, I hope you close it the right way. I hope that you don't make excuses, and I hope that you just read the text for what it actually says, because I don't believe that that following the teachings of Christ and following the teachings of Paul are consistent. I think that you are opposing Jesus by following the teachings of Paul. I feel the same exact way about John, to be frank. John is so painfully obvious that it's not one of the Gospels. I hope that you can come to see that, but Paul is much more obvious. Paul is the clearest example. I mean, he goes against Jesus's teachings several times. He completely changes, like Jesus, like I said, Jesus said that every law, not one stroke of a letter of the law from the Torah will fall until judgment day. He says, until heaven and earth pass away. We go into Isaiah, we go into Daniel, heaven and earth pass away on judgment day. Every Jew in the whole entire world knows that when you're saying heaven and earth passing away, you're talking about judgment day. And by the way, this is in the middle of a speech about judgment day when Jesus said it. So in the middle of his speech about judgment day, he says that not one letter, not one stroke of a letter from the law or the prophets will fall until heaven and earth pass away. So he's talking about judgment day. So all of the laws of the Torah, according to Jesus, are in effect until judgment day. And then according to Paul, they're not under the law anymore. That's the exact opposite of what Jesus taught.
Yeah, and one thing that you know, one thing is, like, I believe all of it, you know, but what I will say is, like, the Quran doesn't mention Paul, which I did find kind of odd. And anything that they do refer to, like Muslims, they refer to Paul, is not generally just not good. And then Jesus did say that, and then I still believe Paul had the vision and wrote Acts, and everything of his story is true, but there is a little bit of a gap there, you know. So like that is, I don't know how you go from, like, you know, like I said, unless it's just like a replacement theory of a disciple, like we need a body to like fill in the gap, then there's a gap there between what Jesus said and what Paul was ordained to do. So
You know, later tonight, it's usually Saturdays. He might do it on Sunday, but it's almost always on Saturdays. There's somebody that goes by the name A's Philosophy, like A apostrophe S.
I know A's. Yeah.
Okay, so A's Philosophy. A's is a really good friend of mine for several years now, and
really?
Yeah, and A's is a bright
guy. Like you that much.
Well, a lot of people don't, to be fair.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But A's is a good example of a Christian that does not accept the teachings of Paul. A's is a very devout Christian. He lives his whole life around the Bible. He goes out of his way to try to live by the teachings of Christ. And Paul, he completely rejects the teachings of Paul.
Interesting. Yeah. He's still a pretty young man though, right? Like when I first met him on like Praise's channel or whatever, he was like only literally like 22 or he was a young guy, so he couldn't be more than like he's definitely under 30 probably. Am I right?
Yeah, I would say so. Somewhere in his
that's the same
20s.
guy. And
Yeah.
when he found out that I also believed in the Quran and so like he was like he really like, but he was a young kid then too, so like I'd be interested to crash his broadcast and see what he's up to.
Well, I think you should talk to him about the Bible. I think he can take this Paul conversation to a level that I'm not even able to. He knows the letters of Paul better than I do. I don't read the New Testament very much. And as a Christian, I did, but I haven't been a Christian. This will be 10 years now. This coming August will be 10 years since I've been a Christian, and I haven't really spent much time reading the New Testament in those past 10 years. I've focused mostly on the Old Testament because my interests are in the origins of the Bible. So it's kind of like, I think of the example of like, I saw Forrest Gump when I was a kid. I saw Forrest Gump like 10 times when I was a kid. I love that movie. There's like more than half the movie that I don't even remember. You know what I mean? Now that it's been so many years, and like the same thing's kind of happening with the New Testament for me because I don't keep up on it like I do with the Old Testament. I'm reading the Old Testament literally every day. I read the New Testament like once a month. But A's philosophy reads the New Testament all of the time, and he focuses on Paul's teachings a lot. He knows them like the back of his hand. He knows chapter and verse off the top of his head for anything you're going to bring up related to Paul or how it relates to the Gospels or anything like that. He would be able to have a way deeper conversation about this with you.
Is he associated with any is he Calvinist or any like denomination or anything?
Unitarian.
Unitarian. Okay. What about? Do you happen to know Kevin's biblical? What's his name? Kevin's biblical readings or something like? Is he hanging out with him at all, or you don't know?
I don't know. I've only really seen him on his channel, and then he goes on Objective Ethics sometimes too.
Oh, I've heard about yeah, he was on Gretchen's once or twice too. So like, he seemed like a pretty solid guy.
Yeah, he is.
So you say Saturday A's philosophy has his little broadcast or something?
Yeah, typically it'll be later at night, like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock maybe. 7 to 9, somewhere in there is when he'll start them Eastern time. And he'll do a talk. He'll allow people to chat and comment, and he'll open up the live stream and let people come up on stage and talk and ask questions and grill him or debate or whatever you want. He'll pull up articles, whatever you need.
Yeah, I think I'll check him out and ask him, what the Paul thing is, because I think he'll remember me. Like, I can't remember his ideology exactly, but we didn't necessarily. I mean, we agree on like certain things or whatever, but like generally, he didn't really see me as I don't even think he thinks I'm a Christian. Anyway.
Well, I don't know if I would either. I think you're probably a Muslim, aren't you?
No, I'm Christian. I mean, I believe the Quran and Muhammad was the true messenger because the Quran is true. But I mean, I couldn't turn my back on the person that saved me, right? So like, I have to be.
Neither do Muslims.
I have to be Christian first.
Muslims recognize the importance of Jesus too. They repeatedly exemplify that in the Quran. He's a prophet.
Yeah, but
yeah, and you think he's God because the Gospel of John.
No. Well, no.
I mean, Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't say it.
But the thing is, like, when I had my vision, Jesus presented me to the Father, and so, like, basically, he claimed me as his before the Father, right? So that's how I was justified, and then I saw my name written in the book of life. So I can't, even though I believe the Quran is true, and therefore Muhammad a true messenger, I couldn't turn my back on the guy who saved my life, basically, if that makes sense. So, but I think that there's a gap between Christianity and Islam that is closing every day, as a matter of fact. So, anyway,
You have to keep in mind that, like, the Quran says that they believe the teachings of the prophets in the Bible.
yeah.
So they view Jesus as a prophet, right?
Well, they do, but there's also, in my opinion, also parts where, like, you know, his deity is kind of expressed. It's just very kind of, indirectly. If that, unfortunately, it's not a direct thing. Even though chapter 78 is about the gospel, the great news, like, it's not, it doesn't necessarily say that Jesus is God, and it also does have some verses that deny him as the Son of God. So there are issues, but I think overall, the case can be made for Jesus Christ in the Quran. And I have, a lot of verses that would, I could show you that would, make, someone at least consider that. But it's not it's not an easy task. Anyway, I'm starting to fade out a little bit, so I think I want to end here.
Okay.
But
no problem.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, man. I think we got a lot of good discussion. A lot of good topics, a lot of advanced stuff, in my opinion. So anyway, I hate long goodbyes. Really appreciate it. We'll see you around, and have you come back, because I enjoy having you on the show and stuff. Whatever, not a show, just just me. But anyway, we'll see you later, bud.
All right. Take care, the freak.